Vajrasattva Mahasamaya Sappa Ahom Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manapaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Diro Meboa Sutokayo Meboa Supokayo Meboa Anarakta Meboa Sarvasiri Memberyasa Sarva Karma Sutsame Siram Shriyam Koro Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabha Mahasamaya Sappa Ahom.
Okay, so let's start with a couple of prayers to get ourselves back into this space and a good state of mind for being here.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger.
So just take a few moments to let those words settle into your mind and try your best to really feel them, to feel those very positive wishes for all sentient beings. And then have the motivation to be here and listen and think about the teachings with the wish to be of benefit to others, to do as much as you can to bring about their happiness and their freedom from suffering. So yesterday I started to talk about the first of the four immeasurables, loving kindness. And there's no fixed order for these. There are prayers in which equanimity comes first. So this particular prayer starts with loving kindness. And when it comes to cultivating them, developing them, we can do that in any order, but maybe it's easier to cultivate loving kindness. That might come more easily to us because I think most people already have the feeling of love. We are loved by others as we are growing up, and we have loving relationships, with people. And I know I have met some people who say they have a hard time feeling love. One man I met said that he didn't receive love from his mother. I don't know if he was sort of abandoned or she just wasn't a loving person. So he said he had a really hard time feeling it because of not experiencing it himself as a child. So there may be some people who have difficulty feeling love, but probably most people are able to feel it. And I seem to recall reading or hearing a quote from Chogyam Trungpa, who was a Tibetan teacher who taught in America for a long time. And he said something like, everybody loves something, even if it's ice cream. So, I mean, that's not what we're trying to cultivate here. That's not the kind of love we want. But I think maybe the point was he was trying to say we do have some ability to have fondness in our minds and our hearts. Maybe hard with people. I remember meeting one young woman. She was about in her teens, still in her teens, and she said she found it easier to love animals than people, which is understandable. People are so much more complicated and can hurt you, whereas, animals are usually, as long as you take care of them and treat them well, they're very happy and love you. So I could understand what she meant. But I think probably most of us do have some experience of feeling love and being loved in our life. And so then it's just a question of tapping into that feeling, that experience, and then trying to cultivate it further, more and more, for more and more people, more and more beings. And so yesterday I explained a meditation for developing loving kindness, and I thought today to talk about some other ways that we can increase that state of mind, loving kindness. I hope you got the slides this time. Good. So these are some things I thought of, and if you have other ideas, you can share them afterwards. So I think practicing mindfulness and introspective awareness are helpful. So mindfulness can have different meanings, but the most well-known one is simply paying attention to what we are doing and what we are thinking, being in the present moment and knowing what's going on inside of us. And then introspective awareness is kind of like a companion of mindfulness. They say that if we have mindfulness, we will also have introspective awareness. Sometimes it's called vigilance. That is a mental factor that enables us to know if something we're doing or something we're thinking is unwise, is hurtful, like being able to notice the wish to say something hurtful to somebody. So you can see that popping up in your mind. And you'll have the recognition that that's not a nice thing to do. It's not a good idea to say that. So they say it's a little bit like a spy, an inner spy on our self, on our own mind, watching our mind, and being on the lookout for something unwise, something negative. And so if we can cultivate those two qualities or two mental factors, then that can help us to avoid doing things or saying things that would be hurtful, that would be unkind to others. So it's kind of just keeping track of ourselves, keeping track of our behavior, and making sure we do things that are kind and helpful rather than unkind and unhelpful. And I think another way they can help us with kindness is that if we have more mindfulness and alertness, vigilance, then that will also help us to pick up on what's happening with other people. Yeah, because these two qualities aren't only with respect to ourselves, but they also pay attention to other people and things going on around us. And so if we're really like perceptive, sensitive, then we can notice somebody's expression or body language or, little tears starting to well up in their eyes. So it will help us to notice that, somebody needs kindness, somebody needs compassion. So, yeah. So those are things that can help us with cultivating kindness. Then the second point is learning how to counteract afflictions that interfere with it. And so this is a really big topic. There's a lot of material in Buddhism about the different mental afflictions. They're also called delusions, disturbing emotions, negative emotions. We already looked at a few of them. Anger is a big one. Anger and the different forms of anger, which can start with just aversion, dislike, annoyance, impatience, and then go to the other extreme of, violent rage and aggressiveness and, ready to do something really hurtful to another person. So there's a whole variety of that state of mind. And so that's probably as we saw yesterday, that's the number one enemy, opposite to loving kindness. It's just totally opposite to that. And we probably all have it to a certain extent, so it's important to pay attention to it, be aware of it, and learn to work on it, learn to manage it. And there's a lot of material in Buddhism, whole books written about anger. There aren't so many books about other afflictions, but you can find them here and there in Buddhist books, that explain the mind and emotions and so on. So look up material on how to deal with different afflictive emotions. And if anyone has a question about a particular one you want to ask about, then I'll be happy to answer. But it's just too big of a topic to deal with right here. But just have that awareness that there are things in myself that are like enemies, obstacles to being loving and caring and kind as I would like to be. But we can work on them. It's definitely possible to learn how to manage them. But when doing this work on our afflictions, our disturbing emotions, it is important to be kind to ourselves. I've mentioned that already, that if we notice anger, we realize, we have a lot of anger, we have a lot of other afflictions, to not get into self-criticalness, self-loathing, self-deprecation, and so on. So you can remember the the points I mentioned this morning to avoid doing that. And remember to cultivate love and kindness for yourself as well. Although that can be difficult if you have a long history of not being nice to yourself and of beating yourself up. It does take time to change that. But if you work on it slowly, it is possible to do. So I had problem with that a lot in my life, and I would sometimes notice self-talk, like my mind talking to myself, and I would say, I wouldn't talk to anyone else like that. I wouldn't say those things about anyone else. I'd be too ashamed. So why do I think it's okay to talk to myself like that? So that was helpful to realize, that sort of self-talk, self-criticalness is just not the right thing to do, not what I really want to do, not helpful. And then educate ourselves so we can read and listen to teachings on kindness. So there's lots of books and teachings, podcasts, CDs, online courses, specifically on how to have more love and compassion. And so, what some people do is they'll take a book and just read a little bit, one page, when they first get up in the morning or before they go to bed at night. So even just a short amount of time each day can really help us to just familiarize ourselves more with those states of mind and get ideas, inspiration on how to cultivate them. A really good book, a lot of good books in the Book Nook. What is it called? The one with Russell Coates. An Open-Hearted Life. That's a really nice book, co-authored by Venerable Children and Russell Coates, who's a local. He's in University of Washington? Eastern Washington University. So he's a psychologist and practices a kind of therapy called compassion-focused therapy. Yeah. So he has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience with compassion, and so they co-authored this book. And it's one nice thing about it. It consists of many, many short chapters, just 1 or 2 or 3 pages. So you can just take one a day. There's 60-something chapters, but taking one a day, eventually you'll get through it. Some very, very helpful ideas in there, both from the Buddhist perspective and Western psychology. And then another thing that's helpful is to associate with kind people. Hang around with people who are kind and let it rub off on you. So we are easily influenced by others. So if we spend time with people who are angry, selfish, always complaining and blaming, then we might find we're becoming more like that ourselves. But if we spend time with people who are kind, who act with kindness, who think with kindness, speak with kindness, then we'll notice that we become more like that. I think that's one reason people like coming here, because there's a lot of kindness here. This community, we're practicing kindness with each other as much as possible. And then starting the day with reciting verses, like the monastic mind motivation, just reminding oneself how important it is to act with kindness and compassion. And then the next point is reflect on the kindness of others. So there's actually a whole meditation on this in the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment. Probably many of you have heard it and have meditated on it. But it's part of a method for cultivating bodhicitta. And it involves contemplating what we have received from others, starting with our parents, in particular our mother. Right? So it's a really amazing meditation. We don't remember, I'm sure. Does anyone remember being a baby? Yeah? A real small baby? Yeah, that's pretty good. But I think generally, that part of our life isn't in our memory, conscious memory. And so we don't remember being born. We don't remember our mother, feeding us, bathing us, changing our diapers. Yeah, but she did all those things, and so it's really helpful to contemplate what our mother did for us. She's probably the one who gave us the most. I mean, there are exceptions to that. If she passed away or she gave you up, then it was somebody else. But there was somebody that took care of you when you were an infant. And so you just think of that person. And then what they did, how they helped you. Think about how helpless we are. Now, we don't usually think about that. But, there was a time in our life when, all we could do was lie on our back and wave our arms and legs in the air and cry when we were hungry. But we, totally helpless. Unable to do anything for ourselves, unable to move ourselves, unable to feed ourselves, to communicate what we need, except by crying. And so, if it hadn't been for people like our mother, our father, other caregivers, we wouldn't have survived. So our very life, our very existence is dependent on others, the kindness of others. So, there's a whole meditation on that, where you think of your mother giving birth to you, carrying you in her womb for 9.5 months or so. And that's not easy. That's often uncomfortable, painful, requires changes in her diet, her lifestyle, and so on. And then giving birth, which I haven't experienced it, but it must be incredibly difficult, painful. And then, there we are, this tiny, helpless little creature, totally in need of others' kindness. And there were others who were there for us, who took care of us. So just imagining ourselves at that time in our life and the people who took care of us, like our mother, our father, our grandma, older siblings, whoever. And just get a sense of how kind they were to do those things for me, so that I can be alive now and have knowledge and skills that enable me to take care of myself, live independently. Okay, so we're also dependent on the kindness of other people, like our teachers. When we went to school, we needed to learn. We didn't come out of the womb knowing how to read and write and use a computer and a phone. So we had to learn all those things. So the people who taught us those things. It's really helpful to go back and think about that. And that really, when we can recognize the kindness we receive from others, it naturally gives rise to a feeling of gratitude, appreciation, and then wanting to repay that kindness. Wanting to be kind to them, to help them in return. And so this is a really helpful meditation to develop bodhicitta, where we want to help all living beings and become enlightened in order to do that. And then, like on a daily basis, we also depend on the kindness of others, the food that we eat. That was mostly grown by farmers, and then people working in the food industry to process the food, make it into bread and pasta, and put it into cans and frozen bags of whatever. So there's a lot of people involved in the food industry, production of food and transportation of food to the supermarkets, and then being in the supermarket, working there to make it available for us. So a lot of people involved. If we even just to think of one meal, one plate of food that we eat, many, many, many people involved in making that happen, making that available for us. So contemplating them and realizing, yeah, how kind they are to make it possible for me to have food to eat. And the same with everything else in our life. Yeah, the clothes that we wear, the car that you drive, the computer that you use, your phone, your house or apartment, all the things you have, your furniture, appliances. So all of these things were produced by other people. So without them putting in that time and energy and working to produce those things, we wouldn't have them. We wouldn't be able to enjoy those things. So this is quite a expansive meditation. You can spend hours thinking about all the different people that you're dependent on. I mean, even something like water, something as simple as water, although it's not so simple anymore because, yeah, some parts of the world are in dire need of water, and we're running low on water, and more people coming into existence all the time. So water is going to be a big problem in the future, and it is already for some people. But, probably most of us have lived where we just turn on a tap and have as much water as we want. So easy to take that for granted. But there's so many people in the world who don't have that luxury. Sometimes they have to walk for miles, getting water from a well or a river and then carrying it back to their homes. It's heavy. Water is heavy. And many people live with shortages of water. And so the water that we have is made available to us by a whole bunch of people. I mean, the people who, out here we have wells, but they had to be dug, and we needed donations to be able to pay for them. But in the cities, probably where most people live, the water is provided by the city, the town, the county, but there's a lot of people who work to make that happen, to bring the water from its source to the city, build a whole complex system of pipes and make sure they're clean and they're running properly and so on, so that you can turn on your tap and have clean, drinkable water coming out. So, how many times do we think about that? Do we think about the people who make that possible for us? I don't usually think about it, but yeah, this is a way to increase our kindness to others when we realize how kind they are to us, how much we are dependent on others. So, yeah. Then, the last point here is to make wise choices regarding media and entertainment. So what we consume in terms of information, books we read, magazines, newspapers, internet sites, movies, TV, music, and so on. So that can have an effect on us. It's good to pay attention to that, because some of that material might increase unkindness, might increase anger and lack of kindness to others. So just to notice the effect that what you read and listen to and watch has on your mind. And if you notice that, it's stirring up anger, aggressiveness, or selfishness, lack of caring about others, being more self-centered, then you could consider not watching those things, not listening to those things, and choose sources of information and entertainment that can help you to have more kindness and compassion. And the same with, social media and so on. So again, here we need to bring in mindfulness and in introspective alertness to just notice what's happening in our mind with regard to those sources. And try to look for good news. So there are like this, what is it, the Good News Network? And there are probably others as well. But yeah, there are things that can help us have more joy and more kindness and more compassion, more caring for others. So really try to focus on those. And yeah, reading and hearing of stories of other people's kindness, people's acts of kindness, can also inspire us to be more kind. As we looked at yesterday, they find that kindness is contagious. Yeah, so. Okay, any other ideas anyone has on how to increase love and kindness? Things that you found were helpful for you? Where's the microphone?
Thank you, Venerable. One of the things similar to what you were just talking about that inspires me is setting an intention on a day just to notice acts of kindness as I go through my day. Wherever I go, just be on the lookout for other people performing acts of kindness. And I find it very inspiring. It's really beautiful. There's so much kindness out there. So that's been a great one for me.
Yeah, and that can help us avoid cynicism and thinking, oh, the world is such an awful place and people are so awful. People sometimes get into that way of thinking because the news, unfortunately, tends to focus on negative things, bad things that happen, murders and wars and corruption. You don't find many stories of kindness and, good deeds in the news. So we need to, it's good to be aware of what's going on, but it's also good to keep it balanced. So focus on good news and, like you say, acts of kindness. Yeah.
I want to share something that it's done in Sea Learning, which is a program that it's promoted by the Compassion Center at Emory. And it has an activity that's done for preschool students, and I received feedback from teachers saying that there is an activity called the Compassion Tree. So every day the teacher asks children, did you notice someone do something kind? And children have to talk about others' acts of kindness. And every time a kid says something, she writes on a post-it that has the shape of a fruit, that kind of action, and she posts that on the compassion tree made of paper in the classroom. And it's a daily routine, so every day she asks the same question. And the teacher said that was very, very powerful and transformative, and that suddenly kids started talking about acts of kindness from their parents, their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, and that they saw a big change. So I wanted to share that because I thought, and these are 5- and 6-year-old children.
Yeah, if we can start young, it's so important. You get them into good habits, positive habits. Yeah. Sorry? We can do that here. Well, we do when you have the stand-up meeting, isn't it? The stand-up meeting is, everybody mentions something to rejoice in. That's similar. What were you pointing at? Oh, Tracy. Okay, sorry, way over there.
Well, it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, but remembering death and impermanence, because we never know what's going to happen to the people in our constellation, and we don't know what they're going through. Many people are dealing with, severe loss, and so remembering that you could be their last straw, so to speak, and really kindness is the appropriate.
You could be their last what?
Well, if somebody's going through a really hard time and you forget your kindness, we don't know the burden they're already bearing in their personal lives. Just some friends have lost really close people to them, and how vulnerable they are when they're in that state, So.
Thank you. Ryder.
I can go ahead. I think about the tactile experience of one of my cats sitting on my chest as I'm laying in bed, vibrating, purring, and all the warmth coming from the cat as they're looking down at me, slow blinking, and kind of slowly kneading me with their paws, and how I feel. It really feels like that's how I imagine the love of a bodhisattva, is like just this full, pure bliss. And how I can, obviously I'm not going to do that to other people because that'd be weird, but through my actions embody that feeling, and also, the look on my dog's face when I come home and I bend down and he gets so excited to lick me all over my face, and the love that I'm feeling from this other sentient being in those moments, trying to embody those in my meditation and focusing on projecting that outwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryder.
Yeah, excuse me. My comment kind of weaves Curtis's and Tracy's comment in that there have been times in our lives where someone has come to us and said, hey, when you did that thing, it had this huge impact on me. You're like, what? It was so insignificant, so small, and yet it had huge ramifications for them in their lives. And I look at my wife, who's a middle school teacher, and she's dealing with middle school development. Her just tiny acts of kindness have huge ramifications for those kids on a daily basis as they're navigating their development. I think the Abbey has touch points on a regular basis with the people who come here. And I guess those small acts of kindness can be incredible opportunities, because we too have been recipients of that small act, but has been transformative.
Someone else? Yes.
Yeah, this is used a lot as an attitude of gratitude, sort of become old hat, but it's still very powerful. And I think just having a vision of everything you encounter as sacred, even what we might call our enemies or, difficult situations, that to me would be a way of increasing loving kindness.
Thank you. This,
This is something that could go wrong too, but it's happened to me a couple times where I'm going to pick up my coffee in the morning and the barista says, oh, that person walking out the door just paid for you. Or, I don't know how they did that because they didn't know what I was going to order. I could have ordered, 16 coffees for work, but they somehow gave the money for me, and I was stunned, and it's happened a couple times, and being stunned, I just went, thanks, and walked away, but then I wish I could recall a time where I've actually done that, but I know I can do it. And I know doing that would make me feel good, and it would probably ripple to the next person that, got $10 off whatever they ordered. But I do love coffee.
Yeah. So maybe we'll continue. I wanted to start talking about the next immeasurable, which is compassion. So love and compassion are very similar in a way. They're positive feelings for others, also for oneself. But they have a somewhat different focus, because love is wishing others to be happy. So it's aware that others want to be happy, wish to be happy, and we are tuned in with that and want to do what will make them happy. Whereas compassion is more aware of suffering. It's the way it's explained in Buddhism is it's the wish for others to not suffer. And so when someone is suffering, has some kind of unhappiness or pain or problem, and we become aware of that, then it's compassion that arises. It's the, concern for them and the wish to do what we can to benefit them. So yeah, that's the Buddhist explanation, the wish for all beings to not suffer. And a somewhat different definition from Thupten Jinpa's book, A Fearless Heart. So again, he's the Tibetan scholar who was involved with the development of the compassion, what is it called? Compassion training program at Stanford University. So in his book, he says, compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. And when I lived in Europe and was sometimes teaching there, a few times people commented that the word compassion is the same in a number of languages, the Italian and Spanish and French, the Latin-based languages, and also English. And if you look at the etymology of compassion, it can have the meaning of to suffer with. Passion meaning suffer. And that's one meaning of passion, suffer, like the Passion of Christ, for example. And then calm is with. So for some people, they have the idea that when you have compassion, you have to suffer with the other person. And they're not too keen on that. So I was actually told that, yeah, some people aren't too interested in cultivating compassion because it means you're going to suffer with other people who are suffering. And maybe that's more of a Christian idea. Christianity with the Passion of Christ, and then people meditate on that, and they sometimes even develop the same wounds, bleeding wounds in their palms and feet and so on as Christ did. And so maybe, that kind of thing leads to that idea. But I don't think that is the meaning in Buddhism. So I was curious about the Sanskrit and Tibetan words for compassion. So the Sanskrit term is karuna, the name of one of our kitties. Actually, all the kitties we have are named after the four immeasurables, either in Sanskrit or Pali. So karuna is the Sanskrit word, and I was trying to find a explanation of that word and had difficulty, but in I think it was in Sharon Salzberg's book on loving kindness. She said the meaning of karuna is a quivering of the heart in response to a being's pain. So our heart is moved. It's not like a stone, cold and hard, but it moves. It's moved when we realize someone else is in pain. And for the Tibetan term is Ningje, and just on my own, knowing the meaning of those two syllables, Ning is the word for heart or mind, and then J has the sense of being noble, like we call one epithet of Lama Tsongkhapa is J Rinpoche, like the noble precious one. So to me, it seems like Nyingje has the etymology of noble heart, a noble heart. So neither of those meanings expresses anything like you're supposed to suffer with the other person who's suffering. And in His Holiness, talks a lot about compassion, and in one place he says, genuine compassion, as opposed to pity or personal distress when seeing others suffer, is deliberately cultivated for a good purpose. Unable to ignore sentient beings' dukkha, or suffering, compassion wishes them to be free of it. Our minds may be temporarily disturbed because our apathy has been challenged, but this type of mental disturbance spurs us to be more tolerant and kind. It makes our minds strong and determined to aid others and brings benefit to ourselves and others. So he points out the difference between compassion and personal distress, which we can sometimes, somebody just got hit by a car, or they had a heart attack, or they're, going through some difficulty, and we get all upset and distressed about that. That isn't what we mean by compassion, partly because it doesn't do much good. You can just get all flustered and you can't think clearly, and maybe you try to help, but what you do isn't really very helpful because your mind isn't very clear. So that's not what we're talking about. With genuine compassion, our mind is more calm and clear and courageous. We want to step in and help, and we're able to think clearly about what would be helpful and at least try to do what is helpful. So this is something we need to understand, the difference between compassion and other states of mind that may look like compassion, but aren't quite that. I'll talk more about that a little later. But just to share something else from Thupten Jinpa's book, A Fearless Heart, I guess this is more the scientific or psychological explanation, the next slide, of what happens when we have compassion. So, I think looking at this picture, unless you are a person who hates cats, I think you should probably, looking at that little creature's face, she looks frightened and miserable, and maybe she's orphaned, abandoned, hungry, and definitely cold. So I think, most people would feel compassion. So there's kind of 4 steps, 4 things that happen. First is awareness of suffering or need. Okay, so if we were actually looking at that little kitten, then we would have that awareness, by her facial expression, her body language, and so on. She's suffering. She needs help. So that's cognitive. Then second is sympathetic concern. So that's more on the heart level, emotional, but we're concerned, We want to help. So then third is wishing that suffering to end. So we want that little creature to be free of her suffering. That's intentional. Then fourth is a readiness to help it end. So we want to step in and do something. Pick her up, take her inside where it's warm and dry, give her something to eat, comfort her. Okay. So those 4 things can happen very, very quickly and, motivate us to do something, to act. So I think we all do have compassion. Again, it's a natural experience in everyone's mind. And It's probably easier to arise with people or beings that we already care about, like family, friends, pets, and so on. But it can also arise with strangers. But there are probably certain people that we have a hard time feeling compassion for, and instead we may have the opposite. So let's look at the obstacles to compassion. So in the Buddhist scriptures, again, there's a far enemy and a near enemy. So the far enemy, the opposite state of mind, is cruelty. So that's where we want someone to suffer. We might even do something to make them suffer. That's totally opposite to compassion. And so if we ever notice that kind of thought in our mind, even if it isn't wanting to make someone suffer, but it might be kind of secretly happy when someone is suffering, someone we don't like or someone we think has done a lot of harm, and then they have a problem, they're running into something, and we maybe feel you got what you deserved, instead of compassion, feeling, kind of happy about that. So that's, I think, also kind of cruelty. So if we do notice it in our mind, then mindfulness, of course, mindfulness and introspective alertness, that will alert us to the presence of a state of mind that ideally we don't want to cultivate, we don't want to follow, we want to overcome. And it's also helpful to de-identify with it, meaning don't see it as yourself. Don't think this is me, this is who I am, this is a permanent part of me that's going to be there forever. Just see it as an affliction. It's an afflicted state of mind, a delusion, something that leads to suffering and problems. And so, have that view of it and know that it can be decreased and eliminated. And then it's also helpful to remember in the West it's called the Golden Rule, but this is also something we meditate on in Buddhism, that every living being is basically the same in that we all want to be happy, we all do not want to suffer. So that's actually a universal idea. It's found in many religious, philosophical, spiritual traditions all over the world. So it's kind of a basic human awareness. It's already there, we know it. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves of it, that this person, this being, they don't want to suffer, just like I don't want to suffer. And so it makes sense then to not make them suffer. Just as we wouldn't want someone to make us suffer, it wouldn't be right to make someone else suffer. So treat others the way we want to be treated. And then the near enemy, meaning a state of mind that can look like compassion but isn't really, is pity. And it's interesting, in the dictionary, when I look in the dictionary under compassion, they have pity as like a synonym. But at least some people distinguish compassion and pity. So one of the best explanation I ever came across is from Stephen Levine, he's passed away now, but he was a teacher and he worked a lot with dying people and wrote books about that, about helping dying people. So he gave a nice explanation. He said, when our fear touches another person's suffering, that is pity. When our love touches another person's suffering, that is compassion. So pity can involve some fear, like, I don't want to get too close. I might catch what they have. I might suffer. I might get hurt if I get in there and help that person. So it can cause us to be fearful and anxious and not really go in there and help as much as we could. And I think there may also be some condescension, like kind of looking down, you poor thing, I'm up here, I'm okay, and you're down there, miserable. So there may be that slight feeling of, condescension, looking down on. Whereas compassion is more related with love, genuine love and concern, wanting this person, this being to be happy. And when we recognize they're not happy, they're suffering, then we want to move in and help them, do something helpful. So this is something to look at in our mind, in our experience, try to recognize when there's genuine compassion as opposed to pity. So remedies to this would be mindfulness, just paying attention to our mind and learning to distinguish the different states of mind, different aspects of the mind. And then also the golden rule that, they're basically just like me. We're human beings and we want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And this person is suffering and I want to help them. And then work on cultivating our loving kindness and our compassion, the genuine forms of those. The Dalai Lama says they lead to courage. If you really have compassion, it gives you courage rather than fear. And being less self-centered, more willing to put yourself out to benefit others. And then another point about compassion is that people sometimes talk about getting burned out, like when you do open yourself up to the suffering of others, the suffering of the world, you can sometimes feel overwhelmed by it and helpless, hopeless, depressed, despondent. And then that is somewhat risky because then you might just want to shut down. I don't want to know, I don't want to hear, I don't want to get involved, it's too much, I can't handle it. And so that's kind of like a danger that can occur when we do try to cultivate our compassion. So the next slide, how to be aware of suffering and not end up getting overwhelmed by it. So I think that some ideas from Buddhism, points from Buddhism can help us with that. So one is that, like in the Buddha's first teaching the Four Noble Truths, the very first truth is the truth of suffering, or dukkha, which is that it's everywhere. This is just the nature of our life as unenlightened beings, the nature of our world, meaning samsara. It's everywhere. It's in everyone. It's a natural part of life. As long as we're in samsara, of course we have to remember, samsara isn't permanent, it's not forever. We can be free of it. But as long as we are in samsara and others are in samsara, then we will encounter suffering and problems again and again. That's just how it is. So once we contemplate that and get used to that idea, come to accept it, then that can help us to not be so shocked, depressed, overwhelmed when problems happen. That's how it is. I heard a story when 9/11 happened. I heard that, I was really shocked and upset and depressed about that. But I heard one of my teachers, who was in Nepal, and when he was told the news of what happened, that he just sort of remained calm, didn't sort of look shocked and upset, and he just said, that's samsara. And when I first heard that, I thought, that sounds kind of uncaring. Like, doesn't he care about all those people who got killed? But then I thought about it more, and I thought about how he was in Tibet. He was in Sera Monastery in Lhasa when it was bombed by the Chinese in 1959. So there was this uprising in Lhasa because the Chinese wanted to kill the Dalai Lama, and all these people were, in the streets protesting, and the Chinese responded by, bombing, sending missiles, including to Sera Monastery. So he was there when his monastery was bombed. I mean, can you imagine that? Having bombs falling on your monastery and your fellow monks getting killed and having to run for your life. So I thought, he's not a stranger to this kind of thing. He's been there. He's had that experience of violence and death. And so I don't think he's coming from a place of indifference and caring. I think he just has a really good understanding of samsara. This is the situation we are in, and we're trying to get ourselves out of. We're trying to help others get out of as well. But, as long as we're here, these bad things are going to happen. It's kind of inevitable. So I think, the more we can accept that, understand that and accept that, the more it can help us stay strong and courageous even when awful things happen. And then impermanence. So that's another helpful. I mean, it's a reality. It isn't just a philosophical idea, but it's the real nature of things, that they are impermanent, they change. And that's true of suffering as well as happiness. Both good things and bad things. They're subject to change. They're not going to last forever. So that I find that helpful when there is some kind of problem, whether it's my own problem or somebody else's problem, just to remind myself, it's impermanent. It's not going to be there forever. Because otherwise, we might see the problem as permanent. It's going to be there forever. It's never going to go away. And that's probably not true. So impermanence can relieve us of that kind of anxiety. Another idea from Buddhism is that suffering isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can help us in various ways with our spiritual practice. For example, being more compassionate. When people go through difficulties, then they know what it's like. They have their own first-hand experience of difficulties and suffering. And that, it doesn't always work, but it can, especially if we are interested in spiritual practice, it can help us have more compassion for others, because we know what it's like for them. We know what they're going through, because we've been through it too. So if you look at really compassionate people in the world and look at their lives, probably most of them didn't have an easy life. They went through difficulties, and they learned, they grew from those difficulties, and they became compassionate and wise. So going through suffering and difficulties can be helpful, not necessarily only problems. And then another thing that I think is good is to be practical, recognize what you are able to do and what you aren't able to do, because that, like the war in Ukraine, we want it to stop. We want to stop it, but realistically, can we do that? So it's important to be in touch with what we are able to do and accept what we aren't able to do. And even if we can't stop the war, there are other things we can do to help. Offer donations to charities, write our Congress people, join groups, activist type things. There are things we can do to try to bring the war to an end. But it's important to be down to earth and accept what we aren't able to do. So these are things that I have learned in my experience working with people and trying to help them, and sometimes getting frustrated, getting depressed, and so on. So I found these ideas helpful for me. And then I'd like to mention something else about, people sometimes use the expression compassion burnout, and there's been some discussion about that and research about that. And one thing that's helpful is understanding the difference between empathy and compassion. Some people think empathy and compassion are the same, but some research has shown that they're not necessarily the same because of the way they affect our brain. So, and even what empathy is, there are different opinions about what that is. And in Thupten Jinpa's book, Fearless Heart, he explains that empathy is our natural ability to understand others' feelings and share in their experience. It has two key components: an emotional response to someone's feelings, like we see someone looking sad and we feel sad. We see somebody looking happy and we feel happy. So we have an emotion that's similar to what we see in the other person. And then another aspect of it is a cognitive one, an understanding of this person's situation. So it's experienced both on an emotional level and on a cognitive level, like wondering what is going on with this person, what happened to them, and thinking about ways that we could help them. So empathy can arise with various kinds of emotions, both happy, good emotions, and also painful emotions. Whereas compassion is something that arises in response to suffering. When we become aware that someone is suffering, and we already looked at how compassion is defined. So they're not exactly the same. The point I'm making is empathy and compassion aren't exactly the same. And also, there was a study done on the effects, lots of studies have been done on the effects of meditation on the brain. And one study in particular was focusing on empathy and compassion. And Mathieu Ricard, you may have heard of him, French Buddhist monk, former biologist, and he's written a number of books himself. So he's one of the people who's been involved in these experiments. They put him in an MRI machine and ask him to meditate. It must be incredibly difficult. But anyway, this one experiment that was conducted in Germany with Tanja Singer and her colleagues. So he was in an MRI machine and he was asked to meditate on empathy for an hour inside this machine. And he said that he focused on images of neglected children in an orphanage in Romania. I think he'd seen a TV program about these children, and they were suffering physically and emotionally. So he did that for an hour, contemplating those children, and he found it unbearable. Just empathy, just feeling empathy for them. He said, entering into resonance with this pain soon became intolerable. In my mind, I did not know how to engage with these children and felt rather powerless. Merely an hour of intense feeling of empathy, dissociated from love and compassion, had led me to burnout. And the data from, these experiences shows that when someone is experiencing just empathy alone, just feeling someone else's pain but without compassion and love, then areas of the brain associated with negative experiences of pain are strongly activated. So they can see, in the brain, the pain areas are activated. And then, I don't know if it was right after that or another time, then he was asked to meditate on compassion. So they put him in the MRI machine and he spent an hour meditating on compassion. And he said he had a very different experience. He said the images of the children suffering were still just as present and strong, but instead of creating in me a feeling of distress and powerlessness that was hard to bear, I now felt a profound, heartwarming courage linked to limitless love for these children. These states of mind fed my courage and reinforced my determination to help others without increasing my distress. So it was clear, from my perspective, that if there was an empathy fatigue leading to the syndrome of emotional exhaustion, there was no fatigue of love and compassion. So according to this study, when people get burned out from helping others, that it's empathy fatigue rather than compassion fatigue. They have too much empathy and not enough compassion and love, and if you have more compassion and love, you don't get burned out. And I've heard lamas say that, they comment on this expression, compassion burnout, and they say, that can't happen. If you really have compassion, you don't get burned out. So the problem is that we don't recognize what is empathy and what is compassion. And what we need to do is understand what is compassion and work on cultivating that. I mean, I think empathy is associated with compassion. We need empathy to be able to have compassion. We need empathy to recognize, like with the little kitten, this creature is suffering. So it leads to compassion. But if we just get stuck in the empathy alone and don't have the compassion and the love, then that is what leads to burnout. And then the scientists were studying the MRI images. So what they saw was that this is Mathieu talking, when I moved on to compassion, certain regions of the brain, usually stimulated by positive emotions, were more activated than when I remained in empathy. So they could see different parts of the brain were being activated, whether he was just meditating on empathy or with compassion. So just the next slide is just about a meditation on compassion, how to meditate on it. So that could be done either tonight or tomorrow morning. Does that sound reasonable? Or if you've already got a program? I don't know. Anyway, that's up to the leaders of the meditation. But so it's similar to the meditation on love or loving kindness. You bring to mind, here it says, start by contemplating that you and others are the same in wanting to be happy and free of pain. So that, the golden rule. So just contemplate, me and everyone else, every other sentient being, we all just want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. So get a sense of that. And then bring to mind individual persons, and you can start with yourself. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. And then with each person you're thinking of, you can use these phrases or whatever phrases you want, but this is a recommended one. May I be free of physical suffering. May I be free of mental suffering. May I be free of the causes of suffering. So you can change the words, some words that will help you feel that sense of compassion, the wish for freedom from suffering. So you can start with yourself, then think of someone who's suffering, someone you know who's going through difficulties, then a friend, and then a neutral person and a difficult person. So that's the progression, starting with, easier objects and then moving to more difficult ones. So it is recommended with both love and compassion that, we don't have to do all of these in one session. You can if you want, but you could also just spend time cultivating love and or compassion for people that you find easy to do so with. Work on that for a while, and then maybe after a week, after a month, after a year, move on to people who are a little more distant from you and work on cultivating those qualities for them. So you can do it gradually like that. It's up to you how you want to do it. But it's also, it also happens that when you're being guided in a meditation, you'll be asked to think of an example of each of those people in one session, starting with a friend, then a neutral person, a stranger, and then a difficult person. So when you're doing it on your own, you can choose how you want to do it. So we have come to the end of our time, and any burning question? I still haven't finished answering all of these, but I will continue tomorrow. But with regard to anything that came up this afternoon? Andrea?
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that difference between empathy leading to burnout, whereas with love and compassion, it seems to be more fueling and just really some of more of the why behind that.
Well, because I was reading Mathieu Ricard's words, what he experienced when he was doing this experiment. And he said, just empathy, thinking about the suffering of those children without thinking about love and compassion, without bringing in love and compassion. So just contemplating how they're suffering, and feeling how they are suffering. That was just empathy. And that led him to feel burned out, exhausted. But then when he brought in love and compassion, like love, I want them to be happy, and compassion, I want them to be free of suffering, and what can I do? I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he was adding love and compassion to the meditation. And by doing that, he said he didn't feel exhausted, he didn't feel depressed, he felt a lot of energy. He said it fed his courage. And that's what the Dalai Lama says too, that real compassion gives you courage rather than draining your energy. You feel encouraged, you feel motivated to do something. Does that help? Yeah. Well, we have to, learn more about what is compassion, how to generate compassion. There's a lot of books, a lot of material about that, including the one I mentioned, was it yesterday, In Praise of Great Compassion. A lot of material in that book. But of course we have wonderful examples of our teachers, His Holiness and so on, who's been meditating on it, not only this lifetime, but many lifetimes, generating compassion. So, quite experienced in it. Okay, so we'll stop there, and let's dedicate the merit.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings and the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Vajrasattva, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forever.